The gleaming spires of Central Station towered above Zixna as she made her way through the crowded thoroughfare, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the purple light of twin suns. The young Quilaxian cargo pilot kept her head down, trying to avoid eye contact with the various species bustling through the galaxy's busiest trading hub. Her antennae twitched nervously as she approached the assignment division, knowing that today's route allocation would determine her future in the Interstellar Commerce Guild. The office was exactly as sterile and unwelcoming as she remembered from her certification ceremony 3 cycles ago. The bored-looking Zentarian administrator barely glanced up from their console as she approached, all 6 eyes focused on scrolling data streams. "Registration number," they droned. "QX7249P. Zixna responded, her voice barely above a whisper. The administrator's fingers danced across the holographic interface. "Ah, new route assignment. Congratulations, pilot. You've been upgraded to priority class routes." Something in their tone made Zixna's thorax constrict. Priority class meant danger pay, and danger pay meant Earth route. The words escaped before she could stop them, her crystalline structure briefly flickering to a pale green of terror. "Correct. Route E117. Weekly cargo runs between Central Station and Human Colony Outpost Baker 9. Standard hazard protocols apply." The administrator began preparing the documentation, seemingly oblivious to Zixna's mounting panic. Everyone knew about Earth routes. They were career enders, sometimes literally. Humans were Class 13 Death Worlders, evolved on a planet that should have been impossible to survive on. Their very existence defied conventional xenobiology. Stories circulated through pilot lounges about human ships that continued fighting after being cut in half, about human dock workers who could survive in vacuum for impossible lengths of time, about their terrifying ability to repair complex machinery with primitive tools and sheer determination. There must be some mistake, Zixna managed. "I'm still a junior pilot. Earth routes require. Your performance ratings qualify you for priority class assignments," the administrator interrupted. "The Guild is expanding Earth trade routes due to increasing demand. Your ship has been upgraded accordingly. Report to Bay 94 for briefing and departure in 3 standard hours." The documentation materialized in front of her, waiting for her signature crystal to be pressed against it. Refusing meant surrendering her pilot's license. 3 cycles of training, 2 cycles of supervised runs, all her family's investment in her education, gone in an instant. She began, but the administrator had already turned their attention to the next person in line. Bay 94 was located in the station's outer ring, where the largest cargo vessels docked. Zixna found her ship, the Morning Crystal, barely recognizable. New armor plating covered the hull, reinforced shields hummed with power she didn't know her ship could handle, and a team of mechanics was just finishing the installation of what appeared to be military-grade emergency systems. "First Earth run." The voice startled her. A massive Quilaxian stood nearby, his exoskeleton scared and weathered in a way she'd never seen before. Where most of their species maintained a pristine crystalline appearance, his surface was etched with countless marks and repairs. "Kebtor," he introduced himself, noting her stare. 15 cycles on the Earth routes. Was wondering who they'd assigned to the Baker 9 run after Xval. Retired. The way he said retired made her antennae curl. Is it? Are the stories true? Kebtor's crystalline surface rippled with colors she couldn't interpret. About humans? Some are. Some aren't. They're not the monsters everyone makes them out to be. They're worse and better, and completely different from whatever you're imagining. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, kid, you want advice. When you meet them, remember 3 things. First, they can survive things that should kill them. Don't assume they're dead unless you've waited at least a full cycle. Second, they fix things in ways that make no sense. Don't argue, just accept it works. Third, and most important, they value actions over appearances. What does that mean? It means they don't care that your exoskeleton can refract light in perfect harmonies, or that you can recite the entire guild charter from memory. They care what you do when everything goes wrong. And trust me, around humans, things go wrong in ways you can't imagine. Before she could ask more questions, the dock's warning system announced her departure window was approaching. Kebtor stepped back, his scared exterior catching the station's lights. "One more thing," he added as she turned toward her ship. "The humans at Baker 9, they're good people. Show them respect. Follow their safety protocols, no matter how strange they seem. And remember, they're just as scared of some things as you are of them." The Morning Crystal's engines hummed to life as Zixna settled into the pilot's chamber. The upgraded systems displayed information streams she barely understood. New atmospheric sensors, gravitational stress monitors, and emergency protocols she'd never seen in training. As she guided her ship out of the dock, she caught a final glimpse of Kebtor. The old pilot raised one of his primary appendages in what she recognized as a human gesture of farewell. She tried to return it, but her limb shook too much to manage it properly. The route to Earth would take 4 standard days, traveling through regions of space that most civilized species avoided. Her ship's AI had been updated with the latest human-compatible protocols, which seemed to involve a lot of redundancy and backup systems she didn't understand the need for. As Central Station disappeared behind her, Zixna pulled up the briefing documents for Baker 9. The human outpost was located in what they called the Pacific Northwest, a region of Earth notorious for its unstable weather patterns and geographic activity. The station's primary export was something called timber. Apparently humans still built things with pieces of dead plants, and they imported various technological components that they somehow improved through processes that violated several laws of physics. The documents included first contact protocols, emergency procedures, and a bewildering section on human social customs that seemed more like survival horror than diplomatic guidance. Humans apparently engaged in something called small talk, which involved exchanging meaningless information as a way of establishing trust. They also regularly consumed toxins for pleasure and exposed themselves to extreme temperature variations voluntarily. Most disturbing was the section on human physical capabilities. Their endurance alone defied comprehension. They could continue functioning for days without rest, repair complex machinery while suffering massive biological damage, and survive conditions that would kill most species instantly. As her ship entered the first hyperspace junction, Zixna found herself wondering if she should have simply surrendered her license. But then she remembered her family's pride when she'd earned it, the dreams she'd had of becoming a renowned pilot, opening new trade routes across the galaxy. Well, she said to herself, trying to sound braver than she felt, at least if I survive this, every other route will seem easy. The Morning Crystal's new systems beeped cheerfully, plotting the course to Earth. Zixna settled in for what she was certain would be either the most interesting or the final journey of her career. Possibly both. The Morning Crystal shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, environmental systems screaming warnings in 3 different languages. Zixna's crystalline appendages flew across the control surfaces, trying to make sense of the cascading failures. Everything had been fine until they hit Earth's outer defense perimeter, where some kind of scanning beam had triggered an unexpected reaction in her ship's new shielding. Warning: life support degradation imminent. Backup systems compromised. Atmospheric integrity at 60% and falling. The ship's AI managed to sound simultaneously calm and concerned, a feat Zixna would have found impressive if she wasn't busy trying not to die. The massive blue-green sphere of Earth loomed ahead, simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Her designated landing zone at Baker 9 was still 40 minutes away, and according to her rapidly declining system readouts, she had maybe 15 minutes of breathable atmosphere left. Reroute auxiliary power to life support, she ordered, remembering Kebtor's warnings about human space being unpredictable. Unable to comply. Auxiliary systems not responding to commands. Of course they weren't. The new systems, supposedly upgraded for Earth routes, were failing spectacularly. A bitter laugh escaped her as she realized the irony. She might not even survive long enough to meet the humans she'd been so afraid of. A new alert flashed across her screens. Incoming transmission. Earth Emergency Frequency. Unknown vessel. This is Cascade Emergency Response Team at Substation Echo. We're reading multiple system failures on your approach vector. Do you require assistance? The voice-speaking trade standard had an odd resonance to it that Zixna's translator identified as Pacific Northwest accent. She swallowed her pride and hit the response key. This is Quilaxian Transport Morning Crystal. Confirmed emergency status. Life support failing. Auxiliary systems non-responsive. Unable to reach Baker 9. Understood, Morning Crystal. We're showing a safe landing zone at coordinates transmitting now. Emergency teams are en route. Can you make it 12 minutes? Zixna checked her rapidly declining readings. Negative. Echo. Atmosphere at 40% and dropping. Estimated 9 minutes remaining. There was a pause, and she heard muffled voices discussing something in their native language. Then, right, change of plans. Keep your current vector. We're coming to you. Through her viewport, Zixna saw something launching from Earth's surface, a small craft moving at speeds that seemed impossible for atmospheric flight. As it grew closer, she could make out its odd construction. It looked almost cobbled together, with visible welds and patches on its hull. Morning Crystal, this is Echo Rapid Response Unit. We're going to establish a temporary atmospheric bridge. Never done this with a Quilaxian ship before, but the math should work. Probably. Zixna's voice rose an octave. Don't worry, we've got backup plans for our backup plans. Standard operating procedure around here. Beginning approach now. Just try to keep her steady. The human vessel maneuvered alongside her ship with precision that seemed at odds with its ramshackle appearance. There was a loud clang, and her ship's sensors registered an unauthorized docking attempt. Warning. Unknown device attempting to breach hull integrity, her AI announced. That's us, the human voice confirmed. We're going to get you breathing air again, then worry about fixing the rest. Might want to brace yourself. This next part can be a bit rough. Before Zixna could ask what that meant, she felt her ship shudder as something cut through the hull. Her emergency training screamed at her to seal off the breach, but a new atmosphere was already flooding in. Breathable, if oddly scented. Atmosphere stabilizing. Her AI reported, sounding almost surprised. Unknown chemical compounds detected but within safe parameters. A new voice joined the communication channel. Morning Crystal, this is Sarah Chen, Echo Station Engineering. Welcome to Earth. Sorry about the rough welcome. Mind if I come aboard and take a look at those system failures? Zixna's training hadn't covered this scenario. The proper procedure was to maintain ship integrity and wait for certified guild mechanics. But her ship was already breached. She was breathing air provided by an unauthorized source, and nothing in her experience explained how a vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts had matched velocity with her ship in atmosphere. "Ah yes, you may board," she found herself saying. The airlock cycled, and Zixna got her first close-up look at a human. Sarah Chen was shorter than she'd expected, wrapped in what appeared to be multiple layers of protective gear, with a transparent faceplate that revealed features that somehow managed to look both alien and familiar at the same time. "Holy shit, you're gorgeous," the human said, then immediately added, "Sorry, that was unprofessional. It's just the way your exoskeleton refracts light. Amazing. Anyway, let's figure out what's wrong with your ship before we both end up as interesting debris on the mountain." Sarah moved through the ship with quick efficiency, consulting a handheld device that looked like it had been modified far beyond its original specifications. Okay, good news and bad news. Good news is your core systems are fine. Bad news is whoever installed your upgrades did it wrong. Really wrong. Like, probably should be arrested wrong. The Guild-certified mechanics. Zixna began. Yeah, no, Sarah interrupted, pulling open a panel to reveal a maze of circuitry. These aren't Guild standard. Someone sold you counterfeit systems. Pretty good copies, but they're not rated for Earth's magnetic field variations. That's why they failed when they hit our defense scan. It exposed the substandard shielding. The human's hands moved with surprising delicacy as she began disconnecting components. We can bypass most of it, get you running on your original systems. Won't be as fancy, but it'll keep you alive. Then once we get you landed, we can do a proper refit. Got some interesting improvements I've been wanting to try out. Improvements. Zixna watched in fascination as Sarah effectively dismantled the supposedly sophisticated upgrades with nothing more than basic tools. Oh yeah, we've learned a lot working with alien tech. Amazing what you can do when you combine different engineering philosophies. Last month, we increased the efficiency of a Zentarian plasma drive by 40%, just by adding what's basically a very sophisticated catalytic converter. As Sarah worked, she kept up a steady stream of conversation, explaining what she was doing in terms that almost made sense. Zixna found herself relaxing despite everything, fascinated by the human's casual competence and unexpected friendliness. There we go, Sarah announced finally. Primary systems restored, life support stable, and I've added a little something to help with the atmospheric transition. We get a lot of different species through here. Had to get creative with environmental controls. Thank you, Zixna said, meaning it. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here. Sarah's face made a movement that the translator identified as a smile. That's why we're here. Earth's dangerous enough without letting preventable accidents make it worse. Now let's get you landed and properly settled in. Wait until you see the station. We've got a great observation deck, and the cafeteria just got a new shipment of coffee. Ever tried coffee? No. Oh, you're in for a treat. Well, maybe. Depends how you feel about carefully regulated stimulants. As they began their descent to Baker 9, Zixna realized that her fear had been replaced by something else. Curiosity. Maybe Kebtor was right. Humans were different from what she'd imagined, but not in the way she'd expected. She just hoped the rest of her stay would be less eventful than the arrival. Behind her, Sarah was already making plans for improving the morning crystal systems, seemingly undeterred by the fact that half of what she was suggesting probably violated multiple guild regulations. Somehow, Zixna found she didn't mind nearly as much as she should have. Baker 9 turned out to be nothing like the nightmare outpost Zixna had imagined. The station, nestled between towering earth trees called Douglas firs, was a fascinating blend of human ingenuity and alien technology. She'd spent 3 local days there while Sarah and her team modified the morning crystal, learning more about humans than she'd thought possible. Now, loaded with her first cargo of timber and various modified technologies, Sarah had winked while calling them improvements. Zixna guided her ship back into space. The modifications to her ship actually worked better than the original systems, though she was carefully omitting certain details from her report to the Guild. Morning Crystal, you're cleared for departure. Safe travels, Zix. The human traffic controller's voice carried what she now recognized as friendly informality. Don't forget to write. She was formulating a response when her sensors screamed a warning. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace directly in her path. Sleek, predatory vessels she recognized from security bulletins. Drachnid raiders, she whispered, her crystalline structure paling. Before she could react, a harsh voice cut across all frequencies. Cargo vessel, power down and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. Zixna's appendages flew across her controls, but she knew she couldn't outrun Drachnid ships. They were infamous throughout the galaxy. Pirates who considered themselves superior hunters, taking special pleasure in proving it with violence. I repeat, power down or. This is Baker 9 control to unidentified vessels. The human controller's voice had changed completely, all warmth replaced by steel. You are in restricted Earth space. Power down your weapons and prepare for inspection, or we will respond with appropriate force. The Drachnid leader's laugh crackled through the comm. Earth space. Perfect. We've been wanting to test ourselves against the famous humans. Power down your station shields, and we might let some of you live as trophies. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Sarah's voice joined the channel. Morning Crystal, maintain your course. Help's already on the way. Zixna's sensors detected new signatures launching from Earth, small, fast-moving craft that her computer couldn't properly classify. They'd moved in formations that seemed impossible, accelerating at speeds that should have crushed any organic pilot. Last warning, the human controller announced calmly. Power down or be disabled. The Drachnid ships launched their first volley. Plasma torpedoes that streaked toward both the Morning Crystal and Baker 9. Zixna braced for impact, but the shots never reached their targets. The human interceptors moved with impossible precision, their own weapons reducing the torpedoes to harmless energy dispersals. Sarah's voice came through clear despite the chaos. They actually shot first. That makes this easier. Echo Squadron, you are weapons free. Standard containment protocol. What followed defied everything Zixna thought she knew about space combat. The human ships didn't just fight. They danced. Each movement was calculated, herding the Drachnid vessels into positions where their superior weapons and shields meant nothing. They attacked from angles that shouldn't have been possible, using the planet's gravity well in ways that made Zixna's navigation computer throw up error messages. Impossible. The Drachnid leader's voice had lost its arrogance. Their ships are primitive. How are they? Fun fact about humans. Sarah interrupted, and Zixna could hear the grin in her voice. We've been fighting gravity our whole existence. Makes space combat kind of simple in comparison. Also, those primitive ships. They're what we use for training. Speaking of which, a new ship appeared, dropping out of hyperspace directly behind the Drachnid formation. It was massive, covered in what looked like makeshift armor plating and modifications that would give any guild inspector nightmares. The Drachnid ships suddenly found themselves caught between the nimble interceptors and what appeared to be a heavily armed cargo hauler. This is Captain Elena Martins of the Earth merchant vessel Thunderchild. A new voice announced. We couldn't help but notice you threatening our friend and our station. We take that personally around here. The Thunderchild's weapon systems powered up, and Zixna's sensors struggled to classify the energy signatures. Whatever the humans had done to that ship, it wasn't in any guild database. You can't. The Drachnid leader began. Actually, we can. Martinez interrupted. See, you fired first, which means this is self-defense. And since you're threatening both Earth space and a registered trade partner, we get to show you why most pirates avoid this sector. Echo Squadron, Pattern Omega 7. Let's teach them some manners. What followed was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. The human ships moved in perfect coordination, their weapons targeting specific systems with surgical precision. They didn't destroy the Drachnid vessels. They systematically disabled them, piece by piece, until all three ships hung powerless in space. Baker 9 control. Targets neutralized. Martinez reported casually, as if she hadn't just overseen the dismantling of 3 superior warships. Boarding teams ready on your mark. Acknowledged, Thunderchild. Morning Crystal, you're clear to proceed on your plotted course. Sorry about the excitement. We'll have these folks cleaned up by the time you get back. Zixna found her voice. I thank you. All of you. Hey, that's what friends are for, Sarah replied. Besides, those modifications we installed. Consider this a field test. They worked pretty well, right? As Zixna guided her ship back on course, she watched the human vessels begin the process of securing their captives. The Thunderchild looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts, and the interceptors were technically classified as training vessels, yet they had effortlessly defeated ships that most species feared. More importantly, they had done it to protect her, not because of guild regulations or trade agreements, but because they considered her a friend. Oh, and 6. Sarah added just before she entered hyperspace. Next time you're here, remind me to show you the real ships. These were just what we had handy. The implications of that statement kept Zixna occupied for most of her journey home. She had a feeling her reports to the guild were going to require some creative editing, assuming they believed the truth at all. The warning came halfway through Zixna's fourth run to Earth. The morning crystal's enhanced sensors, courtesy of Sarah's latest improvements, detected the solar disturbance long before her standard guild equipment would have noticed anything wrong. Emergency alert. Class X solar event detected. Magnitude exceeding known safety parameters. Zixna studied the readings with growing concern. She'd heard about Earth's star being unusually active, but this was different. The approaching storm would pump out enough radiation to cook most ships' sensitive electronics, regardless of their shielding. Her comm system crackled. Attention all vessels in Earth space. This is Baker 9 control broadcasting on all frequencies. We are tracking a massive solar event. All ships are advised to seek immediate shelter. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Through her viewport, Zixna could see other ships already changing course. A Zentarian bulk hauler, 2 Mercian passenger liners, and what looked like a Drachnid merchant vessel trying very hard to pretend it wasn't afraid. After the incident with the raiders, Drachnid ships have become surprisingly polite in Earth space. Morning Crystal, this is Thunderchild. Captain Martinez's voice was tight with controlled urgency. That storm's moving faster than predicted. You're not going to make it to Baker 9 before it hits. Divert to coordinates being transmitted. We've got a shelter point in the asteroid belt. The coordinates led to what appeared to be a mining operation carved into a massive asteroid. As Zixna approached, she saw other ships already docking. The Thunderchild herself was shepherding vessels into specially designed bays that seemed to accommodate any ship configuration. Hurry up, people. Martine's broadcast. We've got about 15 minutes before the leading edge hits. If you're not docked by then, you're going to have a really bad day. The morning crystal settled into its assigned bay, just as the first wave of radiation washed over them. The asteroid's natural mass and what appeared to be heavily modified shielding absorbed most of it, but Zixna's sensors still registered energy levels that would have melted her ship's systems without Sarah's modifications. All ships secure, a new voice announced. Emergency protocols engage. Welcome to Shelter Station Echo, everyone. Looks like we're all going to be neighbors for a while. The main chamber of Shelter Station Echo looked like it had been designed by someone with a very loose understanding of architecture and a surplus of creativity. Different atmospheric sections were connected by a maze of corridors and emergency airlocks, somehow accommodating dozens of species' environmental needs simultaneously. Impressive, isn't it? Sarah appeared beside Zixna, making her jump. The engineer was wearing what looked like a modified environment suit covered in tools and spare parts. We built this place after the last big storm caught everyone by surprise. Turns out having a backup plan for solar apocalypses is pretty useful. You built this. Zixna looked around with new appreciation. The station shouldn't have worked. It violated at least a dozen guild construction protocols. But somehow it not only functioned but seemed to work better than standard designs. Well, we had help. That Centurion over there. Sarah pointed to a crystalline being discussing something with Captain Martinez. They're our resident plasma expert. And see that Mercian. Best structural engineer I've ever met. Turns out when you're all trying not to die, species differences matter a lot less than good ideas. A warning klaxon cut through their conversation. Attention all personnel. Primary wave approaching. Brace for electromagnetic pulse in 3, 2, 1. The lights flickered but stayed on. Through reinforced viewport windows, Zixna watched in awe as space itself seemed to distort with the intensity of the solar storm. The asteroid's shields glowed with strain, layers of protection working together in ways that defied conventional engineering. "That's not good," Sarah muttered, studying readings on a device that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and optimism. "Shield harmonics are starting to destabilize. If they fail..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the station would die, their ships would be destroyed, and the radiation would probably render this entire section of space uninhabitable for decades. "Can we help?" The Zentarian plasma expert had joined them, their crystalline form vibrating with concern. "Our ship's shield generators." "Yes." Sarah's face lit up. "If we can synchronize them with the station's systems. Captain, we need every ship with functioning shields to link up with the main grid. It's going to void every warranty in the galaxy, but it might keep us alive." What followed was either brilliance or madness, possibly both. Under Sarah's direction, engineers from a dozen species worked to integrate their ship systems with the station's shields. The Drachnid vessel, it turned out, had experimental shield technology they'd acquired that proved surprisingly compatible with human designs. "This is insane," the Mercian engineer commented as they helped splice power conduits together. "It's technically impossible. The energy harmonics alone should tear the station apart." "Yeah," Sarah agreed cheerfully, manually adjusting connections that really should have been handled by computers. "But impossible just means no one's figured out how to do it yet. Besides, we got something better than theoretical models." "What's that?" "Desperate creativity and a really good reason not to die." She tightened one final connection. "All right, everyone. Power up on my mark. If this works, we all survive. If it doesn't, well, we probably won't notice anyway." The combined shield system hummed to life, just as the storm's main body hit them. Energy readings went off the scale as the hybrid defense grid struggled to hold back forces that could have sterilized a small planet. "Shield harmonics stabilizing," the station's AI reported, sounding surprised. "Unknown configuration achieving 147% theoretical maximum efficiency." Through it all, humans moved with practiced efficiency, making adjustments and repairs as needed. They seemed almost comfortable with the chaos, as if operating on the edge of disaster was something they did every day. "You know," Sarah said during a brief quiet moment, "there's a theory that humans evolved to be good at exactly this sort of thing. Finding solutions that shouldn't work, mixing different ideas together, staying calm in emergencies. It's like our whole species is optimized for surviving things we really shouldn't survive." The storm raged for 3 full days. By the time it was over, the impromptu shield system had been extensively documented, improved upon, and was already being adapted for other uses. The Zentarian and Drachnid engineers were discussing potential commercial applications, while the Mercian had started designing new ship configurations based on what they'd learned. As the all-clear was finally given and ships began preparing to depart, Zixna found herself looking at her fellow survivors differently. She'd come to Earth expecting to find dangerous primitives. Instead, she discovered something far more interesting, a species that turned survival itself into an art form, and more importantly, one that would fight just as hard to protect others as they would to protect themselves. "Same time next solar storm?" Sarah asked with a grin as they prepared to part ways. Zixna surprised herself by laughing. "I hope not. But if it happens, I'm glad to know you'll be here." The Morning Crystal's new shields, now incorporating elements of 6 different species technology, hummed contentedly as she set course for her next delivery. She had a feeling the Guild was going to have some questions about her repair logs, but somehow that didn't seem very important anymore. The Guild Review Board chamber felt impossibly sterile after 6 months of Earth runs. Zixna's crystalline structure reflected the harsh institutional lighting as she faced the panel of senior administrators, her latest report hovering between them like an accusation. "Pilot Zixna," the lead administrator began, "your recent activities have drawn considerable attention. Your ship's modifications violate 17 different Guild regulations, You've engaged in unauthorized technological exchange with a Class 13 species. You've participated in unsanctioned defensive actions. And perhaps most concerning, you've submitted requests to permanently maintain the Earth Road assignment. She stood straighter, remembering Sarah's words about humans valuing actions over appearances. All of those statements are accurate. Then you admit to violating guild protocols. I admit to surviving. Zixnat activated her personal projector, displaying footage from the solar storm incident. These violations saved not only my life, but the lives of dozens of guild-registered crews. The humans of Baker 9. Yes, about the humans. A different administrator cut in, their scales shifting to a dismissive purple. Your reports about their capabilities seem exaggerated. You claim they defeated 3 Drachnid raiders using training vessels. I have sensor logs, which were recorded on illegally modified equipment, the first administrator noted. Pilot, your record before this assignment was exemplary. We are prepared to be lenient, considering the psychological stress of prolonged exposure to a death world environment. Simply agree to reassignment and... The chamber's doors hissed open, interrupting the proceedings. A massive Quilaxian entered, his scared exoskeleton immediately recognizable to Zixna. Senior pilot Kebtor, the lead administrator acknowledged, clearly annoyed. This is a closed review. Actually, Kebtor's voice carried the weight of authority. It's now an emergency session of the Guild Transportation Security Council. My credentials, if you need them. He transmitted a data packet that made the administrator's scales shift through several colors of surprise. Now then, he continued, settling into an observer's stance, I believe Pilot Zixna was about to explain why maintaining and expanding Earth routes is crucial to Guild security. Please continue, Pilot. Zixna felt a very human-like grin trying to form in her crystalline features. Thank you, Senior Pilot. As I was saying, the humans of Baker 9 have demonstrated capabilities that the Guild has systematically underestimated. Their technological innovations, their primitive modifications, an administrator corrected. Their innovative solutions, she continued firmly, have improved shield efficiency by over 140% in documented tests. Their combat capabilities deterred Drachnid expansion into an entire sector. And most importantly, they've shown a consistent willingness to protect and assist any vessel in need, regardless of origin. She transmitted another data packet. This is a preliminary trade agreement already signed by representatives from 6 different species who survived the solar storm with us. They're proposing a joint development initiative, using Baker 9 as a testing ground for new technologies that combine multiple engineering philosophies. Preposterous, the lead administrator declared. The Guild cannot endorse. The Guild, Kebtor interrupted, might want to consider that these agreements will proceed with or without official endorsement. The only question is whether we want to maintain influence over the process. Zixna activated one final projection, the modified shield designs that had saved their lives. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. They thrive on solving problems that everyone else considers impossible. Yes, their methods violate Guild protocols, because our protocols never imagined some of these solutions were possible. The administrators conferred in hushed tones, their colors shifting rapidly. Finally, the lead administrator's scales settled into a resigned blue-gray. Your arguments have merit. The Guild will review the proposed trade agreements. In the meantime, your Earth route assignment is confirmed as permanent. However, their color darkened. You will be required to document all modifications and innovations for Guild review. Of course, Zixna agreed, carefully maintaining a professional tone despite her relief. I'm sure Sarah will be happy to explain everything. She's very enthusiastic about sharing knowledge. Several administrators visibly winced at that name. Apparently, Sarah Chen's reputation had spread beyond Earth's space. As they left the chamber, Kebtor fell into step beside her. Well handled. Though I should warn you, your friend Sarah's enthusiasm for sharing knowledge has already caused 3 different guild technical committees to request stress leave. Only 3. Zixna laughed. She must be holding back. Last week, she was explaining her plans for something called quantum tunneling enhancement to that drachnid engineer who's been helping with shield harmonics. I didn't understand most of it, but they both seemed very excited about violating several laws of physics. That's humans for you. Kebtor's scarred exterior rippled with amusement. Give them an impossible problem, and they'll find a solution that shouldn't work, probably breaks several fundamental rules of the universe, but somehow succeeds anyway. It's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. It is, she agreed. I used to think Earth route assignments were a punishment. Now I understand. They're an opportunity. We just had to stop being afraid long enough to see it. Her comm unit chimed. A message from Baker 9. Sarah had apparently developed something new and wanted to test it as soon as possible. The message included multiple warning labels and a note that Captain Martinez had already agreed to provide emergency backup just in case. Another impossible project? Kebtor asked, noting her expression. Probably. Zixna felt her crystalline structure shifting to colors of anticipation. Want to come along? Sarah's always happy to have more test subjects. Volunteers, he corrected with a laugh. Humans prefer the term volunteers. And yes, I think I will. Someone has to help document all these guild violations properly. As they headed for the docking bay, Zixna reflected on how much had changed since her first terrified approach to Earth. She'd expected to find monsters and instead discovered friends. More than that, she'd found a place where the impossible was just another problem waiting for someone creative enough to solve it. The morning crystal, now bearing the marks of countless modifications and improvements, waited in its bay. Its systems hummed with energy patterns that would give guild engineers nightmares, and its logs contained enough violations to fill a regulatory database. But it had also survived things that should have destroyed it, protected others when they needed help, and carried its pilots safely through adventures she'd never imagined possible. In short, it had become very much like the humans who had helped transform it. And Zixna wouldn't have it any other way.